Hello everyone, this is Alex, and today I am doing a review of BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro. This review is long due because I've been using the software for more than 1 year now on very different occasions, and I really wanted to share my thoughts with you on the product and especially on the Pro version. So if you're here at first, I just want to tell you that I'm not necessarily comparing BBC in this video to other products, to other sample orchestras, but I'm mostly evaluating the value of the product itself based on my personal experience as a concert music composer. Over the years, I became really good at sampling instruments because in my education I worked with real instruments. So when I hear a bad sample instrument that's not realistic, I really, there's a red flag here. But yes, just on a general note, if you want to know what is BBC Symphony Orchestra, what type of sample library it is, well, it's basically a very realistic library for live instruments. So what to use BBC Symphony for? Myself, I really use it for my own compositions when I'm working with an ensemble and I need to provide them with a sample of how it's going to sound. BBC Symphony Orchestra will really do a great job in that regard because there's nothing added to the instrument. So for you who want to do hybrid orchestral music, I just want to let you know that BBC is a little bit dark. It's nothing exciting the sound, but it's much more like natural. It's very impressively natural. It's kind of crazy sometimes. But yes, if you're looking for something that's more exciting, then I'd suggest, other libraries that works more in that area. So yes, with that being said, let's go and have a quick look at what the 3 options of BBC Symphony Orchestra offers to you. The lowest one, which is Discover, is free. And the second one, which is Core, is around like 500 Canadian dollars. And the Pro version is around 1,000 Canadian dollars. In regard to these prices, you can have some discounts. If you're a student, if you're a teacher, myself, I'm a teacher, so I got an educational discount. It's 50%, which is kind of crazy. Otherwise, there's always sales. There was Black Friday recently, and they had pretty interesting sales. But are they worth it? This is the good questions. So let's get a look at the differences between these 3 versions. So BBC Discover is basically nothing. You don't get a lot of things. 33 instruments, 1 mixing signal, so you get just 1 mix. 47 techniques, so that's usually like short notes and long notes. You get the plugin which comes with it from Spitfire Audio. You got the strings, separate strings, but it's only sections, right? You got the piccolo, that's the only special instrument you have here, the solo instrument. Then you got flutes, oboe, clarinets, bassoon that are all grouped, so you don't get solos with them. Then horns, trumpets, trombones, and bass trombone, tuba. These are basics for orchestral writing. The problem with this is that you just get long notes and staccato notes, long and shorts. And this is kind of a big constraint with this because sometimes you want staccato notes, but the staccato articulation doesn't work. Or it's good for one instrument, but it's not right for the other. Sometimes there's like spiccato or even like accents notes as for zandos, sometimes that I prefer to use, that you get access to them with the Pro version. But yes, you don't have any percussions here. You really got just a basic orchestra and all groups as well, so it's quite limiting in that way. But still, it's free, so maybe it's good for you. Then there's the Core version. They say I own this because I bought the Pro, but this one's a little bit more dense and it's interesting. You got the violins and you get all the articulation. Actually, it's the same with Pro. You get all of these. So already Core is like a very, very big step from Discover. You get violin 1, violin 2, alto, cello, basses. And then you get solo woodwinds. So you got solo flute, group of flutes, piccolo, solo oboe. So again, quite a big steps. You got the horns, solo horns with all of these articulation, the klaxon, which I don't know why they translated it this way. This is actually the horns, trumpets, solo, trumpets, the three trumpets with all of these articulation, tenor trombone, solo, and the group of tenor trombones, bass trombones, tuba, etc. You don't have, although, like English horn, contrabassoon. You do have the piccolo, it seems like. Yeah, we do have the piccolo. Yeah, the piccolo is here. It's the only one. But you don't have English horn. You don't have the bass clarinet. You don't have the contrabassoon, which are often used in orchestral writing. The only limitation here. And also, you don't get any solo strings. That's the big, like, something's really missing here. Because you use solo strings all the time, and whether or not you're sampling a real orchestra, and I really wish they had it there, because then for me it was a no. I couldn't buy the core version. I had to go to the pro. So anyway, then you got the percussions, which are very detailed. You got the harp, all of these pitch percussions, and then non-pitch percussions, which are sounding great as well. So they're all there. And the other thing, which is not included here, are the signals, the different microphones position. Trying to make this bigger. So there's the signals, different microphone position and combination of them to hear instruments from different perspectives and create your own custom mixed. So you got one with core, you got one with discover. This is just the orchestra coming from one place, so one microphone setup. And then with pro, you got 20. So for me, it was kind of a necessity. If you want to have this close mic feel to a soloist, which you want to bring more in the front, and having an orchestra, a string orchestra that's behind, it's a little bit more wide, especially in like cinematic composing. You don't necessarily always want this mix of an orchestra in a hall. Yeah, this was also a big decision for me. And you got more techniques, you got more instruments. So these are mainly the soloists, but you get, I'll show you in my interface later, you get also all kinds of like specific instruments like contrabass, tuba. I never used this one. I didn't know this existed. But now I'm using it because it just sounds awesome. So now that we've talked about this, let's talk about this. The size is pretty crazy, right? It's huge, and I had to buy like a new hard drive just for this. It needs to be SSD as well, so the instruments will load faster. This is all because of the different signals, the different microphone positions. They all have to load them individually, and so it just multiplies the size of these libraries. It's crazy. So anyway, you can read all this on their website. The round robins, it's just very, very good. The legato sound is amazing. And they explain all of this, dynamic layers, techniques, etc. But now let's go and have a look at the interface itself. So here is the CC11. So if we go see what it is exactly, it's the expression. The expression is actually the volume. It sounds weird because sometimes the expression is really associated with the dynamics, but in this case, it's associated with the volume, just plain volume control. And in this track, I only used the modulation wheel, which is this line here. So this has more control over the dynamics of your track. If you see, there's something that moves quite a bit with this. The third thing you have here is a choice. You have a choice over different effects that you can control depending on the instrument. So these actually, you can see them here in the FX little square. You got reverb, release, tightness, variation. Some of these don't apply, again, to different instruments. For the brasses, for the horns, we only have access to the reverb here, which I tone all the way down just because I like to have them as dry as possible, especially when you use so many instruments. This track has like a lot of instruments. So I tone the reverb all the way down, and then I add in some reverb
in my sections, like my brass section here. This is a group from brass. But the reverb at its lowest is already pretty wide for BBC Orchestra, especially in this first mix. And that's the next thing I want to talk about, which is kind of amazing with the Pro version. That's the only thing you get with the Pro, is that you get all of these variation that you can use. So these are all different mics that were used to capture the sound. So you can decide to use each and every one of them and arrange them however you like. I can say that when I do something quick like this was just for a simulation that I wanted to give to an ensemble. I wanted to do, and I didn't have a lot of time. I just wanted to have the simplest thing possible. The first mix is always very good, especially when it's to be made in a concert setting. The first mix is basically this. Then you got a second mix, which is basically a different combinations of all of these microphones that you have here, and you can just decide to take down all of these mix and just focus on the close mic, for instance. Let's just listen for the horn on the close mic. And let's go back to listening to the first mix here, the wide mix. There's quite a big difference, right? And this is really what sell everyone for Pro, is that it's really made for professionals. If you want to have this flexibility, which is very important, like if you want to use one of these beautiful instruments and the beautiful sound of these instruments in like more a closer setting, just to put it in your mix, and that you're not stuck with the big sounding mix from the room, like a large room, then I mean, you don't have the choice. You have to go with Pro. Otherwise, you'd have to rely on other VST. That's what a lot of my colleagues and students do. They don't have the money for the Pro, so they go with Discover, and then they rely on other free VST or other like VST that they already had. But yeah, it's not ideal. Other interesting thing is this little thing. This helps to create a stereo width to your sound, which is kind of amazing. If you want a group of strings which is a little bit wider, then you can really do that. It's a little bit less obvious with like Soloists, but still the reverb is a little bit wider. And if we go back here, you see all of the different articulations. You can toggle through them here. There's quite a lot for, like we saw the list earlier. There's quite a lot for all of these instruments, and it's you can see the key switch that you need to use for each one of them. You will use all of them definitely for different types of character. You can also do transposition here, and I recently discovered as well up here you have the tuning. You can tune up or down some sound as well. Do some panning. This one is a little bit to the left. Adjust the volume here. There's different ways, like you can have compressed velocity high and compressed velocity low, so you can avoid getting into extreme registers. Just make sure that the volume is not too loud or not too soft. There's some other different settings here that you can use and try out. And here in these settings you can play with different things. There's different options for the interface. There's different option here for the maximum voice preload size, the stream buffer size. You don't necessarily need to touch this unless your computer is really having some hard time. The master tuning is interesting. You can take it down a little bit lower, like some orchestras, and especially like Baroque ensemble, they play a little bit lower, some play a little bit higher. It gives different color to the sound of the instruments. So you see that you can take it up or down. And yes, that's about it for the interface here. So I was talking about the different instruments. So you got the strings. So every strings as a leader. So the leader is actually a soloist. We'll have a listen to the soloist a little bit later. And then the winds. We can talk about the winds. The horns, you have one horn or four horns. You don't really have this kind of huge horn sound like eight horns, like Hans Zimmer style. If you want to do that, you can use like two sets of four horns playing the same note. You just have to be careful with this. It's common with VSTs when you multiply them to have some kind of weird like frequency problem. But BBC has a good round robins. It means that every time you play the note, the performance change, or the sample is not the same exactly. So it's something that won't really happen. A thing to avoid that is to pan the two different set of four horns a little bit differently, or have one of them a little bit louder than the other, or maybe do like a slight EQ on one of them. Otherwise, then the trumpet, you got the solo trumpet, a group of three trumpets. So you don't have two trumpets, which is kind of also a standard sometimes in the orchestra. But yeah, three trumpets is like you have the soloist or the group always. Tenor trombone solo, and then three tenor trombones. And then the bass trombones, you got two. So that's like a group of of bass trombones. That's unusual. Usually you just have one bass trombone and two tenor trombones. But yeah, two bass trombones is okay. You do have a contrabass trombone. So if you want to use a soloist playing in that register, then you can use this one. And then the tuba, and then these are the unusual instruments. The contrabass tuba, I've never seen this, never wrote for this. I don't know anybody who owns this, but yeah, it's here. And then the chimbasso, which is a great instrument that is more used like with wind bands. But yeah, it's cool. It sounds great. And this one is only available with the Pro, I believe. And then the woodwinds, you have the flute, solo flute, and then three flutes. Same thing, you don't have two flutes, it's always three flutes. You don't have four flutes, it's always three flutes. So, but yeah, that can be a problem if you're writing something for a smaller orchestra. Maybe you can use two samples of the solo flutes to do the like a group of two flutes playing together. So it sounds a little bit less big than this one here. But it's just a little difference. But it can add up if you like consider that all of the woodwinds are three groups like this. Clarinets, oboes, same thing. Bassoons, same things. And then contrabass clarinet. This is unusual as well. Bass clarinet is more and more seen within orchestras. It's a beautiful instrument that can play with the bassoons, with the low section of the woodwinds. But yeah, the contrabass clarinet is really unusual. I haven't tried it yet, but should sound cool. English horn, that's very common as well. I don't believe it's there within the core version. And then the bass flute, it's not really used in orchestras that much. And then we got the percussions, all the pitch percussions. These are the same that comes with the core version, I believe. And then the untuned percussions, this one is interesting. It contains a bunch of other percussions. I'm just loading them. So basically, the different key switch or articulation represent the different instruments. So you got the anvil here, and then the second articulation here, which is C#1, is the first bass drum with different kinds of attacks, and then there's a second bass drum. This one is panned on the other side. This is helpful when you have like two percussionists on the stage, one on the left and one on the right, and you want this big kind of sound two bass drums and one on each side. So it's already panned, and it's been recorded that way, so you don't have to worry about it so much in the mix. And then cymbals, military drum, which is basically a snare, different kind of snare, but then you got two snares, and then piatti, that's hand cymbals. Then afterwards, tam-tam, tambourine, tenor drum, that's a tom-tom. Toys, that's also a bunch of different instruments, like guiro and stuff like that, castagnettes, little instruments that play with hands, and then triangle here, which sounds quite nice. Okay, now so let's have a listen at a few different instruments here. We talked a lot. Let's start listening. This is a piece I wrote. It's a brass and percussion ensemble. So we'll have a listen to the ending part here, which is quite intense. So this is the whole section. Let's have a listen to just the horn. So you see that I'm using this sound, the long cuivré. It means a brassy sound with long notes. So I'm not using the standard long here. If I can show you the difference. But let's go and listen to the horns a little bit earlier when they play soft. And this is where I think this software and these VSTs stand out a lot. So you see a beautiful like choral kind of texture. And this is all from the amazing articulation that they have, which is their legato. Their legato, in general, for BBC Symphony Orchestra, is just, it really makes us hear like for every instrument, the performer changing note or changing position. I'm not sure what it is exactly that they did, but like for the cello, you can hear a kind of like small glissando. It's not necessarily glissando that they do when they change note, but they do try and keep playing, so we don't hear a gap between two notes when they're playing legato. So it's kind of a small movement that we hear, and it's very well done with all different instruments. It's very well done with the brasses here that you could hear. Everybody here is on this legato articulation for the beginning. I like to use this as much as possible when doing these kind of lines, legato lines. The long articulation is more when you want this a single note, because sometimes the legato as a strange attack. Something you can notice, and sometimes you need to work around that with having the first note being a long note. It's kind of weird sometimes, but yeah. Anyway, otherwise for the brasses, staccatissimo, marcato, you got all of these flutter tongues. Multi-tongue is kind of taka 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 taka, a fast group of notes. Trills, major, minor, muted sound. Staccatissimo, like long, and staccatissimo, marcato, so different kind of articulation with the mute kind of sound. So it's quite, I could do like a video just on the articulation of the horns itself. Otherwise, let's have a listen to the trumpets. So you see here that I do change a lot of articulation within this. The first long note here is marcato. And then the short notes are all staccatissimo, to make sure that we have the attack and the small attack for this and the long note for this here. Yeah, I do have mostly the same articulations, all the brasses, and then the groups of trombones. Let's just listen to these. Sounds pretty cool. And what I love the most here, it was actually a euphonium in this piece, but I used the cimbasso, which is, it's not the same instrument, I know, but it sounds kind of similar. It doesn't have like as much articulations as the others, but it's still pretty cool. And then the tuba sounds amazing. You can hear it in this section with the beginning section we just heard earlier with the horns. It gives this very deep kind of sound. I just love it and want to use it everywhere. And you got also a lot of articulations for a tuba, which is great. We're always scared to use the tuba for just long notes, but can play like accents and can play like sforzandos, flutter tongue. They can do a lot of things, and it's a beautiful instrument. And finally, the percussions in this section. There's only the drum here that is not from BBC. They unfortunately don't have a drum. But yeah, let's listen to this section, percussion section. The snare drum sounds great here. The timpani is great. And they all come from the same sample library, so it feels like really they're mixed in the same place, same room. It just feels all tied up together, which is something that, if you're missing an instrument and then you go get it from another software, try to mix it in. It's going to be a lot of work to make it sound like together, you know? All right, so let's have a listen to another cue. All right, so now let's talk about strings. Let's just have a listen to this, just the string part of this small piece. So this is all based on the legato again, which is crazy on the strings, as you can hear. These are all section patches, so you got the whole first violin, second violin, etc. What's interesting is that the first and the second violin are not recorded by, like, they're really different. You got to be careful with it because sometimes some articulations, they're even like the performers are doing them differently. I'm thinking, I think it's about like short notes, like the spiccato or the staccato. For the second violin, it's very different than the first one. Sometimes I had to change it, basically. It's kind of a problem in that case, but most of the time it's interesting because it just complements it so well. It's very like a natural complement to the first violins. This second group that's very different in your mix and that sits in a different place, and you really feel like it's a whole other sets of musicians. The thing that I want you to hear is this same music performed by, these are solo patches, the solo ensemble, so leader for violin 1, violin 2, etc. So let's listen to it now. So yes, this is where we really hear the legato patch at its best. It's really with the soloist. Like the first thing I did when I bought this, I opened like a solo cello and I recorded something and I played something with the legato articulation and the modulation wheel. It was just like so realistic. It was very, very impressive. And so these are amazing sounds that you can use within your music. And now we're using it with an orchestra, but if you're doing like hybrid music or I don't know, just like video game music, and that you need like this kind of moment where you need a solo cello in the middle, then you can use this, and if there's things around it, it's just gonna give it a lot of support, and the realism of this particular VST is just gonna work out perfectly. You don't need to hire a real musician sometimes with this particular VST. Another tip that I would give you is that these like soloists sound so good. I like to do that a lot. It's like you have a section of violin playing the line, and then you do a second group of tracks of soloists which do the same line. The soloists are usually within the string orchestra, so it's kind of natural, and they always play louder than the rest of the section. So it's kind of okay to blend it in. It gives a little bit more definition. We can listen to just the beginning of this with that in mind. See that it gives a lot more depth to the sound. This is something you can do, and that it just feels natural as well. It's not like you're adding like tons of different instruments. It's just what happens on the stage, right? There's a soloist, there's the leader of the section, he's there or she's there, and then there's the rest of the section behind it. All right, and now to finish, I'm going to show you a full orchestra with all of the different sections, and maybe you can listen at first to the Woodwinds bit, which we didn't really listen to quite well. So this is just the Woodwinds from the excerpt. So already you can understand that it sounds pretty good. Let's have a listen to the low Woodwinds, which is, to me, the really big takeaway here, and especially this one, the contrabassoon. With the bass clarinet here and the contrabassoon, which just gives so much color. It's so good. It's so good. I want every orchestra to have a contrabassoon. And it's just for 2 notes in this here, which is okay because the contrabassoon is pretty extreme. Now that we listen to the Woodwinds, let's listen to the whole excerpt with percussion, strings, woodwinds, and brasses. So you see that I froze my different tracks because otherwise my computer would melt. It's pretty intense on your computer, all of this, especially if you're using so many. It's kind of hard at some point, like to even mix, because you want to pull the volumes up and down. And especially if you're changing articulation, if you're using a lot of the legato articulation is like super consuming for your computer. So you have to have it either already on your computer or an SSD drive like I do, which is much better. And then I believe like it sounds so real that it's very easy to mix afterwards, because you just have to balance volumes and listen to how the different instruments feel like on the stage. For me, as I'm very used to working with real orchestras and real performers, this is so instinctive, and just playing with the volumes, don't need to like go crazy with like EQing and all that stuff. It can really give this strong result very quickly. So the bottom line for BBC Symphony Orchestra, it's amazing, but there are some little things, of course, like all VSTs that you bump into it. But I'm surprised there's not more, right? Because we're used to have tons of problems with VSTs and have to try to find a way to avoid them by, hiding some instrument or hiding like this specific note on this specific instrument, the specific articulation, which doesn't sound good. Like you don't get that much of this here. Like there's a few things, like I said, like the articulation for the violin 1 and 2 not being the same. And also I noticed that the vibrato for the solo strings is either on or off. There's not so much like gradation between like a little bit and a little bit more, and it's a little bit like bumpy, but there's a way around that, of course. It's not like big problems. Another big problem is the size of this library because of all of the different microphone placements. It's crazy. So you have to have a good computer, a good SSD drive to run this library, to load it quick. Like sometimes I would just have to wait like 15 minutes for the like Ableton to load all of my sounds. So it was just not viable. But yes, I really, really love this library. It adds this very like a specific character to it that you cannot find in any other library. It's quite dark. It's quite like roomy. You get this feel like there's a musician on the stage playing in front of you. And this can be super useful in all different kinds of situation when you're composing. And the different mic placements from the Pro version just gives you like access to all of these beautiful timbres and beautiful like performances to put them in your mix however you like. So I would really recommend the Pro version if you can afford it. But yes, again, I would discourage you to get this if you just want to do like very exciting hybrid music with like playing with drums and synthesizers and very like exciting like big brass Hans Zimmer style or something like that. It's not made for that. You can maybe get to that, like if you really treat the sound afterwards. If you multiply, like I said, the horns by 2 or 3, you get a big group of horns. Maybe add in some reverb, add in some like a little distortion. It can help you get there, but it's not made for that. There's other libraries for that. But yes, I would say it's very like on top of my list from everything that I've tried over the past 10 years or so.